All right, how you guys doing? You sound, I'm just going to say, honestly, I just came back from the marriage retreat, and we had 60 people in a really tight space that were really jacked up on sugar and a whole lot of stuff. And the energy, I'm saying, it was good. And like this, it feels like you guys are like, yay, we're okay. And online, give me like some hand claps and hearts, like see some noise online. But here live, look, are you guys excited to be here today or not? Yeah. Okay, I thought so. And I apologize because we just got back from like a camp type setting where it's like really exciting and all that. So I'm making you guys rise to that level. But I love to have the energy in the room. I think it's cool when we're coming together to learn and to grow, to be excited about that, to be looking forward to anticipate what God can do in our lives. And so I hope that you have that anticipation today. Now, we are in a series that we started a couple weeks ago where we said basically for the month of February, we got relationships on the mind. It's the love month. And then it seems like relationships are such a large part of our lives. And the ones that go right, it's a big boost for us. And then the ones that aren't doing so hot, it's kind of like the thorn in our flesh. And what if we tackled the four of the largest skills that could help us have relational success from Scripture for this month? And so today we're going to be addressing communication. Communication causes a lot of conflict in relationships, especially being a married man. I can speak to this in a marriage relationship. There's a guy by the name of Emerson Eggerichs, and he actually has this thing. He says basically that when men are talking, they're speaking through a blue megaphone, and women are receiving it through their pink earphones, and it's just not translating. It's lost in translation because the communication, there's a breakdown. What I'm trying to say is not what you're hearing and vice versa. And really, when it comes to communication, to have good communication skills is super important because really, 40% of our life, our waking life, not counting our sleep time, 40% of our waking life is listening. 40% of the time that we are awake, we are listening to other people. And if communication is such an important thing to relationships, and listening is such a huge part of communication, shouldn't we work on that one and get that one right? 40%. And statistics say that only 25% efficiency is the average person in their listening skills. We're 1/4 as good as we could be at listening. What would happen if we would get listening right in our communication with the people that we're in relationship with? How would that change our relationships for the good? So we're going to talk about that today. And if you want to work to improve your hearing, you will have fewer arguments, you'll make more friends, and you'll even get this, you'll become more healthy. Dr. James Lynch says that listening physiologically causes your blood pressure to drop. So in essence, I got higher blood pressure right now than you guys because you're listening, I'm doing the talking. So that's a great little thing in your pocket right now. You guys are healthier at the moment. In your notes there, if you're online, you can click on the Notes tab. But in your notes, the author James says this: "My dear brothers and sisters, take note of this. Everyone should be quick to listen, slow to speak, and slow to become angry." And I would like to point out that if you are quick at listening and you are slow at speaking, you will be slow to anger. It's a natural byproduct of that. I heard this when I was a kid growing up. That's why God gave you 2 ears and 1 mouth. You're supposed to listen twice as much as you talk. Honestly, I think I got that one flip-flopped. I got it confused because I think I do twice as much talking as I do listening. I don't know if anyone can relate in the room. Anyone in here struggle with listening? If you're online, throw up a hand there. Yeah, I got people in the room here. This is it. I'll be honest with you. There's a lot of topics that I'm talking about. I got to grow in every topic we talk about. This one, I've got a lot of room for growth when it comes to listening. This is an area that I struggle with. You talk to my family and ask them, I'm so good at cutting people off mid-sentence. I'm so good at telling you what you were going to tell me because I guess I just like the sound of my own voice. I don't know. But I like to talk a lot, and I'm not really good at listening. So as I'm talking, really what I'm saying is, Mike, you need to work on these, and you guys just get to be in the room for it while I work on myself. So this is a therapy session for Pastor Mike. Now, I heard this recently. These are some questions you can ask yourself as it relates to your listening skills. So I want you guys to, these aren't in your notes, but I want you guys to listen to these and just quietly to yourself, rate yourself in each one of these areas. Are you ready? Do I allow the speaker to finish without interrupting? I could just on all these go, nope. Do I listen between the lines for subtext? When my wife says, I'm fine, I'm like, oh, okay, so everything's good then. Is there some subtext going on in that tone? I don't know. Maybe. Do I actively try to retain important facts? Are you listening, or is there a glazed stare on your face and you're hearing noise, but you're not necessarily picking up on what they're actually talking about? Are you actually picking up on important facts? Could you, this has got me in trouble in my marriage more often than I care to admit, where my wife will say something to me and I'm like, sure, absolutely. And then like a week later, she'll be like, why didn't you go pick up the milk from the grocery store? And I'm like, talk about pick up the milk. We never even talked about milk. She was like, you said sure, absolutely. And I'm like, I don't know what I was saying yes to. Why would you hold me responsible for that? But it's so easy to miss out and just kind of tune out when someone's talking. When writing notes, like if you're listening to someone talk and you're writing notes, do I listen for and set down the key facts and phrases to make sure that I could come back and remember what I've been taught? Do I repeat the details of a conversation with the speaker in order to get everything right? So what I hear what you're saying is, if I'm hearing you correctly, you're saying, and then repeat back, no, you didn't quite get that right. You get a chance to repeat it back to make sure you got everything right. Do I avoid getting hostile and or agitated when I disagree with the speaker? Like as they're talking, does steam start coming out of your ears as you prepare your rebuttal? Like, are you able to calmly listen to them and actually rationally and objectively hear what they're saying, as opposed to just shutting them down because you already know you disagree with them, so I don't care what else you have to say. I don't care. Do I tune out distractions when listening? This is what gets me in trouble at home, is I've got something else going on when someone's talking to me, and so I think I'm listening because my body automatically knows how to respond with yes, and all that kind of stuff, but am I actually listening? No. I'm distracted by something else that I'm doing, and what we need to do is put our focused attention on the speaker. Do I make an effort to seem interested in what the other person is saying? Have you ever been in a conversation with somebody before, and while they're talking, you're like, oh my goodness, when is this conversation going to end? I'm so done. You're like, what if you actually paid attention and you showed genuine interest in what they were saying, even if you didn't care about it? Even if, like my wife, she's so gracious. I love the weather, and I talk about the weather all the time. It's supposed to apparently snow maybe over the weekend. So I like talking about this kind of stuff. My wife tries to act interested so often. Sometimes she's just like, honey, you're overdoing the weather talk. Can we move on to a different subject? But she's so good at actively listening to me and actually, I don't know if she's actually caring or pretending to care, but on my end, it doesn't matter because it feels good. She seems like she cares. And then this last one. Do I direct my full attention to what is being said rather than simultaneously preparing my response? Anybody ever been in a conversation, especially if you're in a disagreement, and while they're giving their evidences or their defense, you're like already thinking, I know 3 things that I could say that totally just squelches whatever and you're not paying attention to anything they're saying because you already heard what you want to rebuttal and you're moving on to your defense. Yeah, we got to be more intentional about listening, paying full attention when we're talking to someone. And it's hard. I'll just admit it's hard. By the way, I went through those quickly. If you want me to send you the list of those questions so you can actually maybe put them somewhere, like on your refrigerator, your bathroom mirror, your steering wheel, something that keeps them refreshed in your mind, then you can just check the box in the next step. Send me the list of listening questions, and we'll get those sent out to you. So in order to improve our listening, we need to improve our hearing. That much is clear. And we're talking more about not just hearing words and sounds, more than waiting for our turn to talk. It's about understanding the deeper meaning of what the other person is trying to communicate. That's what we're going to dive into today. With that in mind, I want to share with you 3 hearing blocks and 3 hearing aids that'll aid you in your communication skills. So we're going to start off with the hearing block. So in your notes, what hinders our hearing? Hearing block number 1 is this: presumption. Presumption keeps us from hearing. I got a question for you. Anyone in here ever get in an argument with someone else? You can put your hand up on this one because you assumed you knew what they were talking about. I'll put both hands up. Man, that gets you in trouble, but I'm so good at it. It's funny. I've been around for a long time, and I've presumed so many times in a situation, and it's got me in trouble. You'd think I would learn, but I'm really just an expert at presuming. I've just got that one down, and it seems like maybe if I stopped and thought about it, I should pull back and wait to hear everything they have to say, and then maybe ask questions to clarify so that I don't presume that I know what they're talking about. as opposed to I don't have a clue what they're talking about, and I start saying stuff back that gets me in trouble. Proverbs 18:13, the author says, to answer before listening, that is folly and shame. That hurts. To answer before listening, that is folly and shame. There are 4 wrong assumptions that we make in our relationships with other people. These aren't in your notes. You could write them down if you want. Number 1, there's only one way to see things. There's only one way to look at this situation. The second one is, everyone thinks like I do. I'm right. I know I'm right. There's only one way to look at it. And I'm sorry for your wrongness, but this is the way we're going because I'm right. Number 3, people never change. That's not true. People do change. I'm always in a constant state of change, sometimes for the good, sometimes not for the good. But we are always in a state of change, so don't assume people never change. And number 4, I can figure out your motives. I know what you're really trying to say, even though you're not. I can tell you what you really mean by what you just said. And a lot of times we get caught in this assumption thing where we think we know what the other person is about. We play this game called Mind Reader that goes like this. Oh, I know what you're thinking. I know what you meant by that. And it's not really a good game to play, and there's no real winners in that game. Let me say those 4 assumptions again if you're trying to write them down. Number 1, only one way to see things. That's presumption. Assumption number 1. Number 2, everyone thinks like I do. Number 3, people never change. Number 4, I can figure out your motives. See, presumption will block your hearing. It'll give you poor listening skills and cause many conflicts in your relationships. Here's the second hearing block, and that is impatience. Impatience blocks your hearing. You don't listen when you're impatient. When you're in a hurry, listening skills shut down. The average person, this is where I think I get in trouble. The average person listens at a rate of 650 words per minute. The average talker talks at an average of 150 words per minute. There is a 500 words per minute boredom margin there. And when someone else is talking, I could be thinking about the weather. Is it going to snow tomorrow? Oh, I want to go out to lunch with so-and-so. Where should we go? All this stuff can be going through your mind while someone's trying to tell you something important, and you tune them out. You're not listening. You just want to move on to the next thing. You get impatient. We want people to hurry up and get to the point, and there's 2 reasons for that, or 2 things we do. We try, number 1, to finish their sentence. Ever done that? Ever get caught in the trap of trying to finish their words for them? And then the second thing is we jump to conclusions because we're not patient enough to hear them out. We got to jump to conclusions. I don't have time for what you're going to say. I think I know what it is. Let's just cut to the chase. Let's move on to the next thing. Proverbs 29:20 says, "Do you see someone who speaks in haste? There is more hope for a fool than for them." More hope for a fool than for them. You guys catching a theme here? Yeah. Wisest man who ever lived penned those 2 phrases. To answer before listening, that is folly and shame. And do you see someone who speaks in haste? There is more hope for a fool than for them. I heard a story about this Bible salesman. He was like the best Bible salesman in the whole nation. He got the best sales, and the team came to him like, "Hey, what is your secret? How do you sell so many Bibles?" And he said, "Well, I have the gift of stuttering." They looked at him confused and he said, "You have the gift of stuttering? What do you mean by that?" He goes, "Well, I go up to the door and I say, hi there, I'm going door to door selling Bibles, and I want to know, would you like to buy one, or would you like me to read it to you?" People are impatient. He's playing to that. Crazy, crazy, crazy. I want to read this to you. This is just people being impatient. A man whose car had stalled because of a dead battery on a crosstown expressway managed to hail a passing motorist who agreed to help him. "Since my car has an automatic transmission," he explains, "you'll have to get up to 30 to 35 miles an hour to get me started." The motorist nodded in agreement, smiled, and walked back to her car. After a few minutes of waiting for her to line up her car up behind him, the man suddenly began to wonder where she had gone. Suddenly, he spotted her in his rearview mirror bearing down on him at 30 to 35 miles an hour. That's going to be fun when they impact her. That's great. Here's another one. A new employee of a large insurance company walked up to a paper shredder, stood before it looking confused. "Need some help?" the senior secretary asked. "Yes. How does this thing work?" "Oh, it's simple," she said as she took the fat report from her colleague and fed it into the shredder. "See?" He says, "I see," he said. "But how many copies does it make?" Jumping to conclusions. Oh my goodness. Can get us in trouble sometime. I know many times we have 2 daughters, and a lot of times our daughters will come up to us. We're in the middle of doing work, doing something important, or like something we got to get done. And they're like, Dad? I'm like, yes? I have a question. I'm like, yes? You could just ask it. You don't have to tell me you have a question. You could just say it. That'd cut out, a few seconds. They'll be like, so I was at school the other day, and I was talking to this girl. Oh, I don't remember. I think it might have been lunch. And we're like, is there a question in this somewhere? And I'm so good at just cutting them off, saying, can you please just get right to the point? Why are we having this conversation? And sometimes we just got to pause and listen, slow down, not be impatient, and just listen. Proverbs 29:11 says this: a person's wisdom yields patience. It is to one's glory to overlook an offense. We need to have patience with other people. Wisdom produces patience. When you listen, you're wise. Did you catch that? It's a wise person, someone who listens and doesn't get out there and talk all the time. You got to stop and listen. Number three is pride. Pride makes us defensive and unteachable. We get caught in this trap all the time. I'm guilty of this one, where you think you know everything, you have all the answers, you don't want to ask anybody for help, or you just get on the defense. And so when someone is trying to speak into a situation, your defense is up whether you agree with them or not, because you don't want to appear to be weak. Pride gets in the way. Again, looking at the wisest man who ever lived, in Proverbs 12:15, he says, the way of a fool seems right to them, but the wise listen to advice. We are wise when we listen to counsel. It's not a sign of weakness. It's a sign of strength and confidence when we pause and we ask somebody for help in a situation. We don't have to always have the right answer. We don't have to always be the one to figure it out all on our own. It's okay to ask for help. Some of the smartest people and wisest people I know are people who are first to ask for help or ask for questions. My mentor, John Maxwell, he'll come to his team after thinking about some idea that he wants to take the company a certain direction, and he'll talk to them about it, and he's kind of thought through a lot of it. He's thought it through big, and he'll give them all the angles and nuances, and here's how we could do this, and here's how we could solve that. And then when he gets done, he's famous for stopping with the group of people around the table, and he says, okay, so what am I missing? And he's expecting them, and he's not expecting them to go, nothing, boss. He's expecting them to tell him where the weak spots are in his conversation, his idea. Where are the holes? What have you not thought of? And what if we did that in every conversation we had with people? We paused at the end and said, what am I missing? What is it that I'm missing? How can you speak into this? Because both of us is better than just me. I guarantee that every time. You can learn from anyone if you're willing to ask the right questions. You see, all of us in here are ignorant in different areas. Everyone in this room is smarter than me in at least one area, and everyone in this room is weaker than me in at least one area. We all are ignorant in different areas. And so if you recognize that, the wisest people I know are people who ask good questions. And you can find anyone in this room at any point in time, get to know them well enough, and find out there's something they have a greater capacity in, and all you have to do is ask, and then sit back and listen. Listen as they teach you about an area you maybe didn't have insight in. Proverbs 25 says this: the purposes of a person's heart are deep waters, but one who has insight draws them out. Another translation says, counsel in the heart of man is like deep water, but a man of understanding will draw it out. I know a lot of smart people that sometimes you actually have to kind of have conversation for a little bit, and as you talk to them, you start to begin to ask the right questions, and all of a sudden you begin to draw out this wisdom. I love when I'm at family get-togethers, or sometimes I'm at a church gathering where there's older people who have been around for a while. I was told, by the way, not to say older, mature. Old is like a swear word to people who are mature. But anyways, I love getting around mature people and asking questions. Tell me you've seen a lot of stuff in your life. Tell me about that. Oh, wow. Go back. Tell me about that story. Oh, my goodness. What happened there? I love hearing stories from people who are more experienced than me, have better perspective than me, who have been around the block way longer than me. And we can learn from people if we're willing to draw that out by being patient and asking questions. But we oftentimes get stuck up with pride, and we feel like, well, that shows weakness. I got to prove that I'm smart, at least in a little bit in every area in my life, and it's just not true. I heard that there's 2 perfect ages. You might relate to this: 4 and 14. 4, because at age 4, you have all the questions. And at 14, you have all the answers. Anybody here with a 14-year-old who understands that? I've got a 14-year-old at home. Man, is that so true. And if you got a 4-year-old, you know the other one. Daddy, why is the sky blue? Mommy, why do you use that comb on your hair instead of this one? Like, they have so many questions as a 4-year-old. And then at 14, the questions stop. Well, it happens before that, but at 14, it's prime. I know everything. I got it all figured out. Quick, at 14, go solve all the world's problems before you lose it all. Proverbs 15:31 says, whoever heeds life-giving correction will be at home among the wise. Let me read that again. Whoever heeds life-giving correction will be at home among the wise. Be willing for people to come up to you and give you some advice, to be able to give you some constructive criticism. My mentor, Pastor Ken, I just got to spend the weekend with him at the marriage retreat. And he, at times in my life, would pull me aside. We'd be in the office and like, hey, Mike, let's go for a walk in the parking lot. Oh, my heart started racing. Like, what are we going to talk about now? Because that was never a, hey, what do you think about the songs we're doing this Sunday? It was always like, when you were leading music on Sunday, you did this. And that was okay. But what if you tried doing this instead? And I knew in that moment, I was like, oh, I messed up on that one. I could use help. And there was times when my wife and I were newly married, he'd pull me aside, Mike, I just heard you in that conversation with your wife, Sandy. Do you think that was probably the best way to show love to her in that moment? It's like, no. But it's really easy to get on your defense and go, well, you didn't hear what she said before you walked up. You don't know how it is at home. And we have all of these excuses. But what if we just humbled ourselves and listened to wise instruction when people are trying to talk to us? I heard that there's this pastor who was brand new, and he wanted to learn from his mistakes. And so his first week that he was preaching to the congregation, he told them, he said, hey, I want to grow. I'm teachable. I want to learn. So if you have any feedback for me, please let me know. After the church, when people were kind of lined up to say hi and bye, this man comes up to him. And he's like, Pastor, I just got to tell you, you said we could give you feedback. He's like, yeah. He's like, absolutely. He goes, that message was lousy. And the pastor's like, okay, why is that? And he said, well, you read it. He's number 2. He's like, you read it poorly. And number 3, it wasn't worth reading in the first place. And the pastor's just kind of feeling a little bit dejected, and the guy just walks off. He's like, okay, that wasn't what I was hoping for. The next guy behind him walks up. He's like, Pastor, don't pay any attention to anything he says. All he does is go around repeating what everyone else says. Ouch. Please don't come see me on the patio with your feedback. Just playing with you. So that's the 3 roadblocks. Roadblocks: presumption, impatience, and pride. I want to now switch over. We're going to switch gears, and we're going to go to 3 hearing aids that are going to help you. Those will get in the way of hearing well. These 3 things are going to aid you in hearing people well. The first one is this. Number 1, listen with your eyes. And by the way, all 3 of these you see in the life of Jesus. If you read the New Testament, read the Gospels, and the life and the ministry of Jesus, you will see all 3 of these come out in his life. But the first one is listen with your eyes. Do you know approximately 93% of your communication is nonverbal? Not the words you say, but your facial expressions, your tone of voice, your body language. I mentioned it earlier, when I'm having a conversation with my wife, and I'm like, hey, are you doing okay? And because I maybe sense something, and she's like, yeah, I'm fine. Then I'm like, okay, I guess I read that wrong. But if she's like, yeah, I'm fine, it says something entirely different, doesn't it? I heard this story one time back in the days of telegraph, where you would telegraph people messages that you paid per character that you were telegraphing. And so to save money, you would shorten things up like a little bit shorthand. And this guy's wife, he was a rich man in New York. His wife went on a trip to London. While she was in London, she found this beautiful diamond ring that she wanted to buy. And so she telegraphed, not know the exact words, she said something to the effect of, hey, I found this beautiful ring. Here's the price. Can I buy it? Or can I buy? And his response back was, no price too high. But they didn't put the period after no. And so completely they changed the entire meaning from no price too high to no price too high for you, baby. So she comes home, he sues the telegraph company because he now has this big bill on his hands. But communication is important. If we're not listening to what they're saying, not only with their words, but also with facial expression, with body language, with the tone of voice, then we miss on what they're actually maybe saying. That's why if you need to have a serious talk with someone, by the way, please hear me out on this one. Do not have emotional conversations with anybody over text or email. You want to know why? Because, and I've heard people say this before, and I understand this, that, well, I write the email because I get a chance to think ahead of time and make sure I don't say something wrong, and I get to get my thoughts clear on the paper and all that, and so then I'll email it off. But here's the thing. You had tone and facial expressions and body language in mind when you wrote that down. They receive it however they're feeling in the moment, not how you meant to send it. So there's no way for you to explain the meaning behind the words. And since the words are only 7% of the communication, they're missing out on 93% of what you say. So don't do that. If you need to have an emotional or serious conversation with anybody, text them, hey, can we get together? And a phone call is okay. It's better because you still get at least the tone of voice. But have you ever been on the phone with somebody, or someone's been on the phone and you're with them, and they're like, I'm looking forward to it. Like, have you that you don't even get that message because on the phone you don't actually see what's going on in the room. So here's my feedback on that, because my wife is one of those processors where she needs to write it out, and she's very good at this. If we need to have a serious conversation, she'll write everything out and bring that with her, and if she needs to, she can read that. But she reads it with her intent, with her facial expression, with her body language, or she'll just use it as a guide to maybe have the conversation. You can come back to stuff. But that way you can get those thoughts out clearly, but have the conversation with the person in person, because that's the only way they're going to get 100% of what you're trying to communicate in that situation. Listen with your eyes. Mark 10:21, there's a story about Jesus. This rich man comes up to Jesus, and he's like, Jesus, what do I need to do to be one of your disciples? And Jesus said, it's easy. You just got to do these things. And he starts listing off some of the 10 commandments. And the guy with the light, he's like, I do all those things. That's awesome. And Jesus is like, you forgot one thing. Sell everything you got and give it to the poor. And then you can follow me. And the man's shoulders drop. And he walks off because he wasn't willing to do that. But I want you to read what it says in Mark 10:21 before Jesus tells him this. Jesus looked at him and loved him. He knew what was in the man's heart. He looked straight into his eyes, and with genuine love, he looked at him with love and said, you're missing one thing. Go do this because you're attached to your riches. And if you'll do that, then you can be my disciple. But Jesus looks with his eyes, and he loves, and I see this throughout Scripture as you're reading through the New Testament. As Jesus is having conversations with people, you hear this genuineness come out in the way he talks and the way he communicates with people, because he listens with his eyes. There's this movie, Avatar, that came out a little over a decade ago. And in Avatar, they're on the planet Pandora, and there's the native people, the Na'vi. And they have this phrase, I love this phrase, when they greet each other, they don't say, hello, how you doing, or whatever. They say, I see you. And I love it as they explain in the movie. It's like, I see you. I see inside of you. I see what you're going through. I see your pain. I see you. And when Jesus looks at us with love, he sees us. When you're communicating with the people in your life you're in a relationship with, especially when it's a tough conversation or maybe you're at odds with each other, are you looking at them? Do you see them? Do you see what they're going through? Do you see things from their perspective? I see you. Jesus looked at him and loved him. You can't fake listening. You can't. People will see right through it. Listening skill number 2. Number 2 is listen with your heart. You first got to listen with your eyes, then you got to listen with your heart. There's a story in John chapter 4. Jesus meets this lady. The story's called The Woman at the Well, but there's this Samaritan woman, and Jesus' disciples go into town to get some supplies. Jesus runs into this lady at the well. He's a rabbi, a man, and she's a Samaritan woman. And there's so many things about their culture that make it surprising that he actually addresses her and talks to her. She's in shock. But in this conversation that they're having, he talks to her about how, give me a drink, and then he goes on to saying, if you want living water that you'll never be thirsty again, then that's the well I draw from. And she's like, well, where can I get the water from? Where do I get that kind of water? I don't want to be thirsty again. And all of a sudden, hard left turn. Jesus just completely derails that conversation. He says, go get your husband. Huh? That had nothing to do with the conversation. What does that mean? Go get your husband. And she says, I don't have a husband. He says, you've spoken honestly because you've had 5 husbands already, and the man you're with now is not your husband. See, Jesus saw into her heart. He saw her soul. And a lot of times when we're in conversation with people, we miss the point. Jesus knew what her hurt point was, where her hurt was. If you want to know where people hurt, you've got to look at the heart. If you see the heart, you'll see the hurt, and then you have the opportunity to help with the mending process to repair that. Jesus looked at her and said, I know what you need. It's living water, but first let's solve this hurt, this pain that you got in your life. And she goes into the village after that and says, come see a man who told me everything I ever did. And brings out, it says that the village came out and many people accepted him into their life because of her testimony. But Jesus met the need, the hurt, the pain that she was going through first. Listen with your heart. Did you know that the number one cause of affairs in America is someone finding a sympathetic ear? Really? It's unmet needs. We talked about this last week. People are looking for a sympathetic ear. It's not physical attraction. It leads to that. But it starts with a sympathetic ear. That's where most relationships get into trouble, is someone is willing to listen where maybe your spouse is not able to, or not willing to listen. And so it starts right there and then just keeps going down that path. Listening with your eyes and ears and heart creates strong relationships. It also, by the way, keeps you from being blindsided. If you were in a relationship with somebody and one day they're just like, I'm out, I'm leaving, you're like, what? I thought we had a good relationship. I guarantee, mark it down, there were clues along the way, but you were blind to them. You weren't listening with your eyes. You weren't listening with your ears, and definitely not with your heart. And you missed the cues along the way. If you're, have your kid, and all of a sudden one day they're just like, I want to leave home. I can't stand you anymore. And they're like, I'm out of here. There were clues that would lead you to that point. And in your relationship with your family and with your friends, if you're intent on listening with your eyes and with your heart, you will find the thing that they're saying, whether they're actually saying it with their words or not, and you'll know how to respond to that correctly along the way, make course corrections. It reminds me of my kids when they were really little, and I was distracted, and they'd come up and grab me by the cheeks, grab me and go, Daddy, look at me. Because we oftentimes we get so distracted, we miss out on what they're really trying to say in those situations. And you might say, hey, I want to listen. But when I try to open myself up to listen to my relationships, all I get is anger. They're angry at me. All they do is just lash out at me. Did you know that people are angry for two reasons? Number one, because they're afraid, or number two, because they're hurting. And what if you opened yourself up and said, I'm going to listen to you, and you received that anger, but instead of saying, you're angry at me, you started asking the question, are you afraid or are you hurting? Because it's one or the other. People only get angry when they're hurt or afraid. Have you ever heard that phrase before, hurt people? We tell this to our kids when they come back from school and someone was mean to them. We're like, remember, they're lashing out at you because there is pain in their life. You got to remember that. If you can get past that and you can listen with your heart rather than just with your eyes and ears, you'll pick up on those things. So hurt people. The third thing I want to share with you is this. Number 3 is make time to listen. So we first listen with our eyes, then we listen with our heart. Last thing is to make time to listen. You have to calendar it into your schedule. We are so busy. We were at the marriage retreat yesterday morning, and there was a Q&A session, and someone had asked a Q&A question I got to respond to, and their question was, if we want to show value, because I talked about how if you want to show value to your spouse, you have to set aside time to think and reflect on them and then look for ways to go, okay, I could show them value this way. And the question was, what if you're both so busy you just don't have time to think about to show value to them? And I told him, I said, I know this sounds harsh, but it's true. If you say we don't have time to value each other, you're not saying we don't have time. You're saying you're not a high enough priority to me. Because you will put the things that are the highest priority, you will find time for them, you will put them in front. And so if people say to me, I don't have time for that. I learned this about a year ago. It stings, but you're not saying I don't have enough time. You're saying that is not a high enough priority to me at this time. Because I'm not going to make time in my schedule for it. There's always an opportunity to make room. And if you want to listen to people, you have to make time. You have to calendar it in. You have to make it a priority. The experts say this is staggering. The average couple in America spends 26 minutes a week in meaningful conversation. 26 minutes a week. And we wonder why marriages have so much trouble. We wonder why any of our relationships have so much trouble. We don't spend enough time in meaningful conversation, talking to each other and listening to each other. Mark it on your schedule. Date your mate. Get together with family or friends, but you've got to set it aside and be intentional about it. I want to read to you this little excerpt from a book called Could You Listen, from Cecil Osborne. Listen to what he says. He says, when I ask you to listen to me and you start giving me advice, you haven't done what I've asked. When I ask you to listen to me and you begin to tell me why I shouldn't feel that way, you've just trampled on my feelings. When I ask you to listen to me and you feel like you have to do something to solve my problem, you have failed me, strange as that seems. Listen. All I ask that you do is listen. Not talk, not do. Just hear me out. Advice is cheap. 20 cents will get you both Dear Abby and Billy Graham in the same paper. I can do that for myself. I'm not helpless. Maybe discouraged, maybe faltering, but not helpless. When you accept as a simple fact that I do feel what I feel, no matter how irrational that, then I can quit trying to convince you to get about the business of understanding it all. So please, listen and just hear me. And if you want to talk, wait a minute for your turn, and I'll listen to you. Wow, those are powerful words. It's convicting as I read that and think about all the times that I've violated that when someone's trying to share something that's important to me, and I disregard it or just kind of push it off. What if we would pause long enough and listen to the other person? The last thing in your notes that I want you to write in is this: listening is loving. Listening is loving. Relationships are all about showing and receiving love. Listening is one of the best ways you can express love to someone. Listening is loving. Why is listening so important? Because it satisfies a deep need in human beings, the need to be appreciated, the need to receive attention. We want attention, and when you listen to somebody, it shows that you care about them, that you mean business, that you take them seriously. It shows that you want to understand them, that you think that they're important. If you care, you will be aware. Listen. 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 Would you pray with me? God, this morning I pray for each one of us as we review in our own minds how we rate when it comes to listening. Some in this room might be really good at it. God, help me to know who those people are so I can seek them out for advice. God, for every person in this room who feels like there's something that they got from today that they can work on, they can grow in a certain area. God, would you give them the patience? Would you give them the strength to put active listening into their life? That they would heed these 3 roadblocks to hearing: presumption, impatience, and pride. They would steer clear of those 3, and instead they would embrace the hearing aids of listening with their eyes, listening with their heart, and making time to listen. God, help us this week to have victory in this area, that for every person that we're in relationship with, that we interact with this week, they will notice something different. They will see it in our conversations. They will sense the value that we place on them because of our active listening. Give us the strength to do just that. Thank you for us, God. In your name we pray. Amen.